Matt Dillahunty is a debater mostly known for his work on the Atheist Experience show. He's debated numerous Christians, Muslims, and overall theists of all kinds. He's also progressive politically, characterizing himself and his worldview as that of secular humanism. In this video, we are going to investigate the facade and smoke and mirrors beneath which Matt's shaky foundations for a worldview lies. We're going to look at his antics.
You're the one that doesn't have a problem with it.
Apparently
which is
not
why
enough
this is
to
the
suggest
only
legislation.
debate we are ever going to do. And I don't care if you lie about my views. Don't fuck kids.
The inordinate amount of logical fallacies he loves using.
But I just told you, nowhere in the Bible does it say there are 5 generals in hell.
It doesn't say there's not, does it?
What?
His tendency to be philosophically handicapped, and overall his cry-bully tactics in debates.
When he presented his position here, has nothing to do with secular humanism. From the get-go, it's all about me. Matt thinks, Matt thinks, Matt thinks. I'm giving what Matt thinks, what Matt thinks, what Matt thinks, what Matt thinks.
Matt's position.
I came in with the Secular Humanist Manifesto. I came in with positions that aren't that aren't merely my positions.
Oh, well, as long as multiple people hold the position, it
This
makes it
guy's
valid.
not serious and I'm leaving. James, if you want a refund, you
Well,
let me know.
good day, sir. And I'll cover your refund, Mr.
Cool.
Matt.
He just said he'd cover my
I
refund.
would cover his refund.
No. No, I'm not going to dignify a debate with someone who walked in to trash talk people and be smug and all of the things that he's being right now. He's already said he will cover my expenses. You don't have anything to worry about. This debate is over. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Jackass.
Did you call me a jackass, Matt? Well, you and your husband have a good day, Matt.
Firstly, we are going to start with the fundamental composition of Matt's worldview. In order to do that, we must know what a worldview is. Well, a worldview consists of propositions that a person holds to be true about reality, but more particularly that constitutes certain kinds of claims. Claims in epistemology, claims in metaphysics, claims in ethics, and a suppositional understanding of logic. Now, as Matt doesn't have any justification for his epistemology or the method by which we can know things, the defining characteristic of knowledge being justified true belief, we are going to look into why, in order to have an intelligible worldview that has the possibility to hold any true claims, the fundamental questions of epistemology must be justified. For the sake of simplicity, let's say somebody says the sky is blue. Any normal and rational person would agree with that statement. The message being communicated is shared on a common understanding of reality, our senses, and our intuitive faculties. We all, for the most part, have similar sensual faculties, and as we look at the sky during the day and we declare the sky blue, naturally, we see it to be true. The problem rises in understanding what dictates truth. What makes such a claim true? If one believes it to be the case, or if it is agreed upon by other people, or if it can't be any other way? It's a question that delves into the realm of knowledge. How do we know something to be true? And while Matt grants himself the answer to this question from nothing other than an axiom he prefers to pull out of his ass, it is not actually explanatory in any shape, way, or form. Matt likes granting himself things. In the capacity of propositions, belief is only meaningful so long as it can be interpreted to be valid by a standard without which validity is not possible. So when Matt says, I don't know X, I just believe X, he actually is not making a truth claim whatsoever. For instance, secular humanism is the best model for society. Cannot possibly be a true statement if Matt's foundationalism is taken on. All Matt could say is, I have reason to believe that it is the best. A reason which is confined within his own unjustified epistemology. A foundationalist epistemology of Matt's kind can never refer to the true state of affairs of reality, meaning reality as it actually is, independent of somebody's opinion, as it is objectively. All it refers to is the thoughts of a person. In other words, truth claims refer to the state of affairs of reality. Matt's epistemology can't possibly make references to the state of affairs of reality independent of Matt's beliefs, and hence, Matt's epistemology is incapable of making any claims about what's actually true about reality. And if that's the case, any position he holds is simply irrelevant and unintelligible, insofar as reality itself is concerned. This is why justification of your epistemology is important. Reality has to be coherent and self-consistent, and any model of it has to be so. If it weren't, it would be self-contradictory, meaning reality would both be real and not real at the same time. Truth claims operate in the universe of descriptions of state of affairs, meaning all true claims to be true must not describe a world that is possibly inconsistent and incoherent. In Matt's worldview, it is incoherent and inconsistent from the very beginning. Matt's claims can reflect the true state of affairs of reality, but they also can't tell you how these claims can be distinguished from non-true claims. It superficially and peripherally appears to the layperson that the things that Matt say are actually consistent because they don't contradict each other. And when I say facade and smoke and mirrors, this is exactly what I mean. The decrepit nature of Matt's worldview is shielded by a horde of his philosophically illiterate audience that believes his claims to be consistent only when it is superficially so. It seems consistent because most people have vague notions of logic like non-contradiction and other intuitive understandings of logic and reason. But if we were to take the foundations for these claims to their logical conclusions, a blatantly obvious criticism arises. For instance, let's say we have a guy named Mike. Mike has X set of beliefs about reality based on nothing but his pure imagination. Whatever he wants to believe, he believes. On the other hand, we have our boy Matt. If Matt merely believes his claims to be true because he has reason to believe them by using basic laws of logic, how can he say that Mike's method doesn't accurately reflect reality? Matt might say, well, because his is arbitrary and I'm using reason. Matt often likes to raise this as a rebuttal. No, Matt, that answer is circular, because you haven't told us how your standard of reasoning is the true arbitrator of the state of affairs of reality, because you can't make claims of knowledge or justifications thereof. It's all assumptions and assertions. So once again, we ask, how can Matt say that Mike's method doesn't accurately reflect reality? The answer is, he can't, because he doesn't have a means by which he can distinguish the correct arbitrator of what can be considered to truly describe reality and what can't. It is all simply assumed and asserted. In other words, Matt pulls his entitlement to logic and his own particular use of it as reflective of reality right out of his fucking ass. No sense, no justification, no reason, just assumed and asserted. Not out of skeptical enamor and intellectual honesty, but simply because he's fucking clueless. Another objection that Matt likes to raise is, well, maybe I can, but you can't either, which is reducible to a tu quoque fallacy, which is, if my position can't be justified, your position can't be justified either, right? And this is actually not an argument at all, right? Because just because somebody else might not have an answer to the question doesn't mean your answer to the question or your lack thereof is valid. Biggest problem of this epistemological worldview is that in its essence, all the propositions are stemming from an uncertain source, and it can be alleviated by just understanding what a worldview is. A worldview reflects what reality is. Reality cannot both be consistent and inconsistent. It cannot both be coherent and incoherent. It can only be one of those two things. And when saying that your worldview is fundamentally uncertain at the capacity of knowledge, you're saying that it is possible for reality to both be what it is and be not what it is. From that arises a contradiction. Reality can't entail contradictions. Reality can't entail possible contradictions, because then it wouldn't be reflective of reality. Now that we are done dunking on Matt's epistemology, let's turn over to the metaphysics. Matt evaluates claims on their supposed ability to be scientifically verified through a system he holds as methodological naturalism. So, what is methodological naturalism? It is the idea that in order for a claim to be verified as descriptive of reality, it must go through the empirical process of the scientific method, and more particularly, claims about the explanations of causes for natural phenomena. This entails that metaphysical claims of the kind of, say, things like idealism or whatnot are not verifiable in Matt's worldview, although they can actually be logically justified because they are unfalsifiable, in accordance to Matt. A couple of problems arise. One being the obvious problem of the validity of such a system, but one also engineered by Matt himself as a consequence of his worldview. See, Matt often clarifies to people that he isn't a philosophical naturalist, but rather a methodological naturalist. First, I'm going to demonstrate why, in his worldview, the latter necessitates the former, and then I'm going to critique the system of methodological naturalism as the standard for evidence. Now, in the Matt paradigm, wherein he can't reference reality as it actually is, he will hold belief claims. Now, Matt does believe that reality is composite of matter and believes there's no reason to believe it's composite of anything else, or reducible or emergent from anything else, at least no good reason to believe it. Now, he won't say this as a deductive claim because of its necessary deductive inadequacy, but he will say that all that reality seems to be composite of is material because there hasn't been a demonstration otherwise using his standard of methodological naturalism. Keep in mind, all positions Matt has on anything about reality is that of belief, which we have already demonstrated the problem with. This means in his own characterization of understanding the world, he has maximal certainty in the world being composite of matter as much as he has maximal certainty of his own conscious experience. So the song and dance about how he isn't a philosophical naturalist is pure and utter bullshit. If in Matt's worldview there is only maximal certainty and claims are belief claims, then he believes that reality is merely composite of matter / material with maximal certainty. He just doesn't like taking the affirmative position on it because it's inconvenient for him and he's too much of a coward to defend it. Now, as for the validity of methodological naturalism itself, Matt has somehow managed to make methodological naturalism, in his view, necessitates something called logical positivism. Logical positivism is the idea that if a proposition can be verified by empirical means, then an answer to it bears no relevance to reality. A lot of people may start quarreling in the comment section about how it doesn't do that, or he doesn't do that, but I'll demonstrate how. Methodological naturalism in essence says that claims about causes for phenomena in reality must be tested through the scientific method in order for them to be valid, which means logical explanations demonstrating causes of phenomena in reality are necessarily invalid because they don't meet the criteria of scientific demonstration or justification, which means that logical arguments can't give explanations of causes in reality without them being empirically falsifiable. This entails that these logical explanations are not meaningful in relevance to reality. The problem with this is that this disqualifies the very logic necessary to derive whether methodological naturalism is itself valid. Matt has essentially entailed this view in his debate against inspiring philosophy, wherein he rides off explanations for consciousness and reality source as invalid because they're unfalsifiable. Methodological naturalism says that in order for a cause to be accepted as an explanation for any phenomenon in reality, it must be empirically testable through the scientific method. This means that any non-empirical explanation, like a metaphysical or logical argument for the origin or nature of reality, is automatically ruled out, not because it's been shown to be false, but because it doesn't fit the method's criteria. If you then say that only scientifically demonstrable causes are valid, you've made a leap. You've adopted the view that any explanation not justifiable by empirical evidence is irrelevant to reality and therefore can't be known to be the true explanation, when in reality, there is no logical explanation barring it from being true. But this is exactly what logical positivism claims, that if a statement is analytically true but empirically unjustified, it's not a valid explanation, often referred to by logical positivists as being meaningless even. So while methodological naturalism doesn't formally entail logical positivism itself, when someone like Matt uses it as the exclusive standard for truthful explanations of a phenomena, it functionally becomes a form of verificationism. It's no longer a scientific method, it's an epistemological filter that excludes metaphysics and logic unless they serve empiricism, and it's a retarded epistemological filter at that. That's a philosophical position, not a scientific one, and it's self-defeating because you can't empirically prove that only empirical methods are valid. That's a philosophical claim, not a scientific one. Another problem is that metaphysics is a justification of the necessities required in order for reality to be represented or claims to be made about reality without contradictions. Saying, well, it's unfalsifiable though, doesn't mean anything because not all evidences are the same. Different kinds of claims warrant different kinds of evidence. And when the claim in question is about the logic of reality's existence, referring to what the logic of reality produces as the standard of evidence is fallacious. Falsification is for explanations that will tell you about how a thing behaves or will behave. For instance, I say that tomorrow the sun will come up. That's a testable and falsifiable claim because I can show how it can possibly be not the case empirically. Falsification doesn't concern itself with that as which something exists, meaning the identity of something in reality. All it's concerned with is a claim about what it does, how it does it, or how it will do something, or what it will do. It isn't relevant to propositions of necessity and possibility, which in order for falsification to be a logically valid theory, must be addressed. These questions extend from epistemology to metaphysics. So when I say God is necessary for the existence of reality, for instance, or for example say that reality is emergent from consciousness, Matt's response in saying, well, that's not a falsifiable explanation, is as irrelevant as saying, but those statements can't be shown to be false somehow. It is completely irrelevant to the truth, soundness, and validity of the propositions that are being made. If something is a necessity for the possibility of falsificationism being valid, insisting that falsification be used to determine its necessity is begging the question and is circular. All that's necessary to demonstrate a statement to be true is an argument for it that is deductively valid and sound. Logical justifications for causes of certain phenomena can be absolutely true and absolutely valid if they make claims of metaphysical and epistemological grounding in that the descriptions bear necessities for the coherence of a worldview. So logical justifications for consciousness or God for reality are absolutely logically valid if they are necessities in order for falsificationism and the scientific method to be intelligibly devised as valid theories and not arbitrary, which will again be reductive to epistemological grounding, which Matt has utterly failed. Seeing as Matt's epistemology is flatly wrong, what would render the proposition that in order for a claim to be truly descriptive of reality, it must be falsifiable true? It would be true if and only if the necessary standard without which truth could not exist was falsification and empirical justification. However, if that's false, the methodological naturalist standard is automatically false. So how is the claim that falsification is a necessary standard for true claims about reality false? First, methodological naturalism is unjustifiably circular. The proposition is that in order for a claim to be justified as descriptive of reality, it must go through the due process of the scientific method and falsification. And why must it do that? Because according to methodological naturalists like Matt, and Matt himself, that other methods don't satisfy the requisite standard of evidence, which again for Matt is methodological naturalism. So why is this the standard of evidence? Because, Matt would reply, there hasn't been a demonstration of another type of evidence that explains causes of phenomena and reality. And when referring to metaphysical explanations through logic, Matt exclaims, not these, they're not valid because they don't provide empirical means of falsification for these claims. If you notice, the reason is the exact same as the assertion itself. It's just logical fallacies. X is true because of Y, and Y is true because X is true. Truly riveting stuff. This circularity and its implications in Matt's worldview can't be escaped for a multitude of reasons, but the best being that he merely assumes epistemology and how we know things to be a tool that we discovered to see what's most likely correct. Beyond all, the most hilarious assertion is that to justify claims about supernatural things, one must test it through natural means of testing. To conclude, I would like to posit one more argument against this comical view of evidence. That is, empirical explanations are all extensions of logical explanations. If there were to be phenomena that are supernatural, their testing through logic is as valid as the validity of empirical methods of testing themselves. The only way it would be reasonable to test for supernatural phenomena through natural means of testing is if there were no distinction between the natural and the supernatural. But in the case that there is a distinction, and there is, it actually is unintelligible to do so. That's it for the metaphysics section of the video. You'd think that now I'd go into Matt's beliefs about ethics and politics, but actually I won't. I can summarize my debunking of that with the following clip alone.
Because if we're going to get skeptical here, we might as well go all the way to the bottom for dictating what's good for us.
No, because if you chop off my head, that is clearly not good for me. And it doesn't matter whether it was an act of free will or if it was my lawnmower.
It's clearly not good for you because you think you're valuable and worth preserving.
Yes.
Okay, that's the issue. Why do you think you're valuable and worth preserving?
Because I am the descendants of people who thought they were valuable and worth
Did he really just say that? Monkey value.
Who thought they were valuable and worth preserving, and the ones who didn't think that have killed themselves.
I'm instead, as an outro to the video, going to emphasize something very important to you guys. The reason why I don't go into Matt's ethical and political beliefs to demonstrate they are false. If your foundations for your claims, in the most essential source, that being your epistemology and metaphysics, are fundamentally invalid, nothing you say is actually intelligible through the confines of your own beliefs and worldview. They are all fundamentally invalid, unless interpreted through the framework of a coherent and consistent worldview. This is why, when people object to scrutinizing the epistemology and metaphysics of people on the grounds that there are, trivially correct statements that people make despite having false epistemologies and metaphysics, I respond with the fact that they're only correct so long as they're being interpreted within somebody else's framework. And that framework justifies the position so long as it has a coherent epistemology and metaphysics. No, nobody's saying that you can't go through everyday life and say that the sky is blue and it be correct, but just remember, you can't justify why it's correct or whether it is correct. You're leaving that task up for people that can actually take logic to its necessary limits. My name is Omni, and I do videos on politics, philosophy, and debate. And if you enjoyed this video, I would suggest that you join the Discord group, in which there will be a lot of people that are CTMUs, and there will also be some atheists and shit. So if you want to go anywhere to shit on me or something, you can come into the Discord server, you can debate me, you can yell at me, whatever you want to do. Alright? I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you next time.